Today's video is sponsored by Nobility.co.uk, the leading company in selling legal titles in the United Kingdom. Get a 10% discount in any purchase by mentioning Death Row. Brent Ray Brewer, born in 1970. He was abused as a child and suffered from mental illness most of his life. Brent Ray Brewer received the death penalty for the 1990 robbery and murder of Robert Doyle Lamanek. Brewer and his then-girlfriend Christy Lynn Nystrom approached Lamanek outside his Amarillo business and asked for a ride to the Salvation Army. On the way there, Brewer pulled out a knife and stabbed Lamanek to death as the 65-year-old begged for his life. The couple took Lamanek's wallet containing $140 and went to a friend's apartment where they changed out of their blood-soaked clothing. The two fled Amarillo and 2 weeks later were arrested in Red Oak, south of Dallas. Brewer was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in 1991. But in 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the death sentences Brewer and 2 other Texas inmates had received after ruling the juries in their cases did not have proper instructions when they decided the man should be executed. The High Court found jurors were not allowed to give sufficient weight to factors that might cause them to impose a life sentence rather than death. Brewer was again sentenced to death during a new punishment trial in 2009. Brewer's lawyers alleged that at the resentencing trial, Coons lied and declared, without any scientific basis, that Brewer had no conscience and would be a future danger, even though Brewer did not have a history of violence while in prison. The jury returned its verdict on August 14, 2009, unanimously finding, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Brewer deliberately caused the death of Lamanek. Beyond a reasonable doubt, there is a probability Brewer would commit criminal acts of violence that would constitute a continuing threat to society. And taking into consideration all of the evidence, including the circumstances of the offense, and Brewer's background, character, and personal moral culpability, there were insufficient mitigating circumstances to warrant that a sentence of life imprisonment be imposed rather than a death sentence. Nystrom, the girlfriend of Brent Ray Brewer, was sentenced to life in prison. Attorneys for Brewer continue to work to prevent the execution, arguing that the death sentence is the invalid product of the junk science testimony of Dr. Richard Coons. The attorneys do not dispute the facts of the crime, but they say the death penalty is not justified because Brewer is not a threat to society. The main reason he was sentenced to death is because the state presented unreliable evidence from a guy named Dr. Richard Coons, who they have used in multiple cases in Texas. And Dr. Coons has basically been found by the courts to be an unreliable witness. His testimony and his science has been found to be junk science. Nolan said Coons' testimony should have been ignored because Coons never met with Brewer to give him an examination. The regulations for doctors to testify about somebody's mental health status require them to examine the person, and that did not happen in this case. Coons never met Brent, yet he got up on the stand and said that Brent had no conscience and that he would be a future danger to society, even in prison. That was just outrageous testimony. That should never have been presented to a court. Nolan also argued the death penalty was not justified because Brewer was not a threat to society. On Tuesday, the 9th of November 2023, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted unanimously against commuting Brewer's death sentence to a lesser crime or to grant a 6-month reprieve. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles on Tuesday voted 7-0 against commuting Brewer's death sentence to a lesser penalty. Brent Ray Brewer, who was 19 at the time of Lamonic's killing, said he has been a model prisoner with good behavioral record and has never received write-ups for violent record. He said he has tried to become a better person by participating in a faith-based program for death row inmates in September 2022. He has acquired multiple certificates for completing the program courses after attending classes and doing assignments. We are deeply disturbed that the refuses to address the injustice of allowing Brent Brewer to be executed without an opportunity to challenge Dr. Kuhn's false and unscientific testimony. After 33 years on Texas death row, Brewer's attorneys had asked the U.S. Supreme Court to halt the execution, but Brewer was killed by lethal injection at 6:38 p.m. Central Time at the Texas State Penitentiary in the town of Huntsville Prison, as the family of his victim watched, on November 9, 2023. But before he died, he sent a message to Lamonic's family, delivered by the prison warden, to say, "I hope you find peace, and I mean it." He added that, "I would like to tell the family of the victim that I could never figure out the words to fix what I have broken. I just want you to know that this 53-year-old is not the same reckless 19-year-old kid from 1990. But Deborah Corbin, whose father was killed in the attack, said after watching Brewer die, Brent Ray Brewer was in prison more than 33 years. Our mom says our family has been in prison 33 years. We have been released today." Brewer, in a letter to Lamonic's family that was included in his clemency application to the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, wrote, "I will never be able to repay or replace the hurt and worry and pain I caused you. I come to you in true humility and honest heart and ask for your forgiveness." The execution came hours after the U.S. Supreme Court declined to act on the inmate's claims prosecutors had relied on false and discredited expert testimony at his resentencing trial in 2009. Brewer's lawyers had alleged that a prosecution expert, Richard Coons, falsely claimed Brewer would be a future danger, a legal finding needed to impose a death sentence. His defense attorney Sean Nolan said after the final appeal was rejected, "The Brent that Texas wished to execute is long gone. The Brent they are killing tonight is a kind, generous, peaceful and thoughtful man who spent the vast majority of his time repenting and in religious studies. He is profoundly remorseful for his crime, committed when he was just 19, and he would have done anything to take back the pain he caused the victim's family." Nolan said allowing the execution without an opportunity to challenge Dr. Coons' false and unscientific testimony was an injustice. His lawyers had argued that jurors should have been told that Brewer was abused as a child and suffered from mental illness. Brewer's lawyers also filed a petition for clemency on the grounds that a juror in his 2009 trial misunderstood the jury instructions and wanted to impose a life sentence. The juror ended up voting for the death penalty because she was under the mistaken impression at least 10 other votes were needed to deliver a life sentence. In his last words, Brent Ray Brewer said, "Even though it's 33 years ago, I don't even know where to begin. Now, how do you fix something that can't be fixed? The 53-year-old guy you're looking at now is not the 19-year-old I was in April of 1990. I don't even know that kid. How do you explain stabbing somebody and then running off, and you don't know what happened until later on? You find out they bled out. When you're 19, 20 and you're confused, or you're on drugs, or you're drinking, or you're hanging around the wrong people, you have no real value system. I guess you'd call it a moral compass. I sobered up in the county jail and realized that I had done something I can't undo, and I had to live with that every day." In his last statement, released by the prison authorities, Brewer said, I would like to tell the family of the victim that I could never figure out the words to fix what I have broken. I just want you to know that this 53-year-old is not the same reckless 19-year-old kid from 1990. I hope you find peace, and I mean it. As the lethal drugs took effect, Brewer gasped twice, snored several times, and then took a few quiet breaths. Within 30 seconds, all movement stopped. Brewer was the 7th inmate Texas has executed this year, and he was the 21st person to be executed nationwide. Thank you for watching Death Row.